welcome this Sunday. We have a very exciting conversation lined up. This particular season is a collaboration between 200 Million Artisans and Unplugged Talks. Just to tell you a little bit about who these organizations are and what they do. 200 Million Artisans is a volunteer-run COVID-19 response platform to support India's artisan producers. They assist verified craft-based organizations by featuring fundraisers and initiatives that can be publicly supported. They also drive innovative collaborations to help India's artisans and craft communities. Please check out their website and follow them on social media for more details on what they are doing and how you can be a part of it. Each one of us can play our own part. 200 Million Artisans has invited Unplugged Talks for this particular season, and this collaboration is basically dealing with different materials and people who are working with different materials. Therefore, it's titled, Does It Matter Real? But Unplugged Talks is a virtual platform that provides an opportunity for public engagement with creative minds from across international cultural landscapes. Insightful and candid conversations about personal journeys, explorations, experiences, and anecdotes. These allow us to demystify the illustrious image, associate with creative masters, and encourages a deeper understanding of their vision. This repository of lesser documented narratives we hope will feed into a larger idea of a realistic ecosystem relevant to the 21st century post-carbon society. We imagine this platform to be free from marketplace heroics and one which is open to critical public participation. The Unplugged Talks is initiating an environment of a collective and ethical cultural evolution. It is an initiative that was started by Virendra Vatlu of Mantra Architects and myself, and we've done a number of really interesting conversations, and now in collaboration with 200 Million Artisans, we are very happy to welcome none other than Tejas Sidnal of Carbon Craft. Carbon Craft Design is a Mumbai-based design and material innovation startup building architectural and interior products by upcycling carbon emissions. In January 2020, they launched Carbon Tile. Some of you may have heard of it. For those who haven't, you have to check them out. It is the first tile to be made with carbon emissions. Their focus lies in carbon upcycling solutions for architects, businesses, and end users, addressing climate change issues through craft and design. So basically what Tejas is doing and what he's doing with his company is taking air pollution, to simplify it, and he will explain this to us better, but taking pollutants out of the air and creating products out of them. So a very, very warm welcome, Tejas. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you, Mrinalini, for having me on this platform. Thank you, Mrinalini. Thank you, 200 Million Artists, and Virendra sir for having me on this. It's more than an honor for me to be able to speak to all the people around over here. Thank you everyone for joining as well. I hope we are able to make this an interesting conversation for all of you.
Well, going by the last conversation that we had, I'm sure it's going to be nothing less than that. And I know that you have a lot to share with us. You've been doing some incredible work. You've had an incredible journey. I'm very excited to tell the audience that we're in conversation with a fellow architect as well. That always kind of, brings it back home. But what's also really interesting is that you took your architectural education and you extended it into a business that's been led by products. But this business has also emerged from an interest in research, and research that you've been doing for a very, very long time, and research that you have taken and you've tried to kind of, so it's like taking research out of the classroom. And I think that is what is most fascinating. So tell us a little bit about how you started your journey, how you got into from architecture into biomimicry, and then from biomimicry into material sciences, and now creating tiles out of air pollution. Where did this whole thing start?
Yeah, I think it's a lot about our life journey overall. I think all of us have our own paths. I think I've just had my own unique path overall into it. I would say that I was always excited about biomimicry as a strategy for designing. And I stumbled upon it probably in my second year while I was doing a design competition. And that's when I knew that I wanted to work with this to an extent and try to see how we can build with nature in a way. And I completed my thesis on Biomimicry Institute in Mumbai, I realized that that's something that I want to sort of see built in a way. Moving from that, that's about a decade ago now, 2012 that is, and I started working at a firm. I realized that most of the work that we do is related to the commercial side of the world, and maybe that is what triggered in a way that I want to learn more about it. And back then there wasn't much about biomimicry as a strategy to apply into architecture, because it was either biology or in or sort of architecture. There wasn't. So what biomimicry really means is it's made out of two words. It's bios and mimesis, basically. So bios is life and mimesis is taking inspiration from nature. So essentially taking inspiration from nature to design. There wasn't anything like this as a course. And then I looked at emergent technologies and design, which is in London at Architectural Association in London there. And I sort of decided that I want to sort of work with that and try see what I learn over there. And that's exactly where the biomimicry journey started. And I think from there is when we let into the whole world of research and how we can build with it.
So what's really interesting is that you started your research while you were at the AA in London, but you continued it after you even graduated. You were a little hesitant to come back to India, and I'm curious to know why. But like, tell us about the interest in, and how your interest also changed, right? It's not that you were kind of working with biomimicry and you stuck with it, but how it evolved into other subjects and into other areas. And that is what kind of led you to what you're doing today.
Yeah, so as I was saying, there wasn't any teaching or an academic program around biomimicry then. So there even today there are hardly a handful of companies, one or two companies to be really precise, that are focused only with biomimicry as a designing strategy. And I realized that after my master's, it's going to be extremely difficult to keep up to the excitement of work that we did over there into the commercial world that we're doing. And with that, I knew that I had to sort of do something around that. And I started working on a visiting school. It's like a workshop by the AA. So they have around 100 visiting schools that run all over the world in a year. And I was directing one in India with two of my colleagues, one from Chile and the other guy from London. So with that, I think the whole journey with research and architecture in a way, it got clubbed in overall. But then I had to come back. I didn't get a job in London, and it was really disheartening. I wanted a job to be in London and probably work over there, because I knew if I come back to India, it would be majorly maybe making toilet drawings or some sort of working drawings. And that's going to be the major part of our life. And having thought about that, when I had to come back, that was the last day of my visa. I stayed until the last day, and then I came back eventually. I decided that no, this is not happening completely. I can't be in India. I can't work in India. I mean, there are hardly any firms where we'll be able to work within that research agenda. And I had tried in all of those firms, and they didn't have a vacancy at that time. So eventually, I decided to sort of work abroad and try maybe some other country. And I started to apply everywhere. And then eventually I went to Zhuhai. So Zhuhai is border to Macau. It's in China. And it's a SEZ area with 1 million people as the population, and 2 Indians, me and one more guy who owns a restaurant. So eventually I went there, but I wasn't practicing biomimicry over there as well. It was just very difficult, because maybe I eventually realized that China is not very different from India in terms of work ethics. It's maybe just the same. It's just faster. It's just quicker. You might just see something built in 6 months, what you will see over here in 3 years, maybe, or 4 years. So that's what probably is different about China. So I did that, and then I realized that I worked for a year, and then I couldn't see myself working there for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And then I eventually decided that probably I have to come back someday. And then if I have to set up a platform for research, that's probably the way. And I think the visiting school that we started as a workshop for 10 days, essentially it was a 10-day workshop where we did the entire research for 1 year, and we taught that to 30 students, international and students from all over India. There were tutors from all over the world that came into Bombay, which was the first workshop where we did. And we worked with experimental platforms and materials at the intersection of biomimicry, material science, and computational design. And I think that is where everything sort of merged in together.
And this is also where you did one of these workshops. And of course, you've been doing this over the years, one every year. And one of these workshops was titled Breathe. And that's where this whole thing started from.
Yeah. So that was the third year, or the fourth year is what we did. The Breathe workshop we did in Delhi. We wanted to work with a global phenomena, which is some sort of a global problem which we can solve locally. So in a way, a fusion of high tech with a low tech sort of a technology where we can work with a certain material and fuse it and build scalable solutions with that. And Breathe was one of the workshops which probably triggered the idea of working with air pollution. And that's exactly when I had spoken to Anirudh, who is the founder of Airing. They make ink out of carbon emissions. And when I met him, I told him, can we make bricks out of this? And shall we try it? Because we were trying to build a Gustavino Volt, essentially a completely free-flowing form that we can build just without formwork and without reinforcements, just the guide work. And to our experiment, we realized that it failed because it doesn't have any sort of a commercial scalability to it. Essentially, if you just put it onto a wall, it's just there inside. So it doesn't have any design value. No one's going to pay for 4 rupees a brick. So who's going to pay for that? And that's how we sort of didn't go with that. But we did sort of look into the workshop. We realized that probably we might want to build a scalable solution. So then we looked at a facade. So facade where probably we could capture the air pollutants and eventually make it out of that as well.
Because but tell me, before you get into products, I want to understand why air pollution. Like, at what point you said you wanted to pick up some global phenomena, right? But it could be anything. There's so many things that are happening across the world, and we're talking what 2000. What year was this?
2017. Yeah.
So we're not talking about something that's very far back, right? So we're talking fairly recent. There's a lot going on. Climate change is one of them, but why specifically air pollution? Because see, it's something that affects all of us, right? And we all sit at home and we all look out of the window and we say, oh, gray skies, and of course we're talking pre-COVID times, and you find people wearing these N95 masks and cycling around town and being affected. That the cases of asthma and bronchitis are going up in the city, but a lot of us will just sit back and say, theek hai, it's happening. We'll crib about it, and we'll I won't use the word, but we'll kind of sit at home and we'll complain. But there are very few people who will actually get up and do something about it. So what compelled you to take that action?
I think when we choose a research agenda for a year, I was quite excited about 3 areas, which is clean air, clean food, and clean water. So these were the 3 areas of research that we wanted to pick for a year, and then probably build a scalable sort of a solution or a pavilion around that. So that was the idea. We merge everything with architecture in some way or the other. But then to our surprise, when we researched about it, we found out that as architects, we are responsible for 39% of the global energy-related carbon emissions. That is due to the building and the construction industry. And that was a sort of a shock to us. And we realized that so much of it is because of us. and what we are building and how we are building and how morally and ethically is so much more important for us of how we build. And then we realize probably a part of it is also because we probably are not completely aware of the damage and the impact it does. And with that, we thought that maybe it should be that we start with this, and then we sort of move into a communication where we learn more about the materials as we move on. So that's how we started with air pollution as a global phenomenon, what we take, and then we work with it.
You know, I'd actually like to point out over here, because we have in our audience, we have a lot of people who are not necessarily from architecture or design. And this is being streamed live on social media as well. And what is important, even for architects, I think what is important is that when someone says air pollution, the first thing that comes to your mind is usually traffic and cars, right? And that's like the quintessential image of air pollution is these smoggy skies, but you always correlate that with cars that are jamming the streets. But what you
Yeah.
said, I think, is very, very relevant and very important to understand and to note, that we are talking about not just that, we are talking about large scale contributors to this phenomenon,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is the architecture and the construction industry. And so we're
Yeah.
talking factories that are producing pollutants that are going into the air, and not just individuals. So addressing it at varied scales, right? It's not only about saying odd even will fix it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's not the only solution,
Yeah.
but we are looking at it at a completely different scale where
Yeah.
you're concerned.
Yeah, if you're looking at a material, carbon emissions, right? So carbon emissions has two parts to it. One is the gaseous, and one is the particles, basically, that is there. So the CO2 and the particles, which essentially look something like this. So this is packed in two plastics, one inside the other, so that it really doesn't come out.
Hmm.
So if you see the PM 2.5 that we say, right? So PM is particulate matter, and 2.5 is a micron size, which is something that you can't see from your naked eye. It's this particulate matter which is essentially there in your lungs and my lungs while we are breathing even at the moment, basically. And we thought that how can we work with this sort of a material and build sort of some solution around architecture and make, say, building materials out of that. Because as we are progressing, we are going to need shelter. We are going to need more of infrastructure. And if we are able to, say, sequester this sort of a material, this carbon, into some sort of a building material, then we can yet build. So it's just saying that as an argument, is more development bad development? Or we say that, are we okay with the way we live at the moment? And what do we do about that?
So what you're saying is that development is inevitable, right?
Yeah.
And there will be construction, and that is the one industry or the one thing that is a constant growth today. So there will be construction and there will be development. So if that is inevitable, then you might as well address the process.
Yeah. So it's of how we are building at the moment, and the way we are going, it's just doomsday. We're just closing towards doomsday. So we rather change the entire narrative of how we sort of function. Essentially, to say, if you look at how we build any consumer product right now, so there are 4 steps to it, how we build right now. One, we mine for all the raw materials. Second is we go into an industrial process of heat, beat, and treat. Third, we sort of say package and we ship it. And fourth, we consume and we discard it. So this is a linear economy based model. And what we are trying to do in nature, when you see, it's a circular economy based model. So one's waste is essentially used for something else eventually. So we may not be able to complete the loop absolutely completely. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to close that loop as much as possible. And in between, if we can close smaller loops as well within that, that would be a start to our circular economy based products.
So what I find fascinating here, so this is the researcher in you which is explaining this concept to us, right? But what's really interesting is that in the process of continuing your research and in the process of setting up this initiative that you've started, Carbon Craft, your entrepreneurial side, your research side has run parallel to your business side. to your architectural practice. And I think that is key. And that's, that begs to ask that the practitioners, whether you should have people who are practicing in the industry on the ground, who are teaching people in school. And I would say, wouldn't that be the same thing with research? That if you research or create products and material and innovate, but how do you know the application on ground? How do you actually take that product and apply it to what it's meant to be, to where it's meant to be applied? Does it really work? How do you bridge that gap?
I think the answer to that is, in a way, there is a gap between the industry and the academia in a way. And I think that's, I don't think I need to sort of dwell into that, because everyone sort of has already accepted this fact that it is different, but probably no one's interested in trying to solve that in a way. But there are a few people who are trying to do that as well. But to answer the first question, I feel that both are equally important. The first part, when we said that, is it important to do research overall completely as a complete only research as a area of work? I feel that that's also important, because one will have to sort of, if one chooses that, it's completely into it. But then it's also the industry part. So I would urge more industry players to sort of move into research and probably move into academics in a way, so that they can sort of learn how people have been thinking about that as well, and how we can change the minds of people to really build better. Because the ones who are in the industry would really know how the industry works and how we can sort of move around things. So it's important, it's equally important. There has to be a negotiation between the industry and the academia and the research in a certain way. And if we are able to complete this loop, which is somewhere what we are trying, the academia to, through the workshop that we are having, the entire commercial work that we do around the residential and the commercial work that we are doing, and then the research area of our team that we have built over the years, and say complete the loop in a certain way.
So that kind of brings me back to what you were saying earlier, right? Like taking high tech and applying that with low tech methodologies. So your research is very high tech. The subject that you're studying requires that very sophisticated technology. But what you're doing in practice and what you're doing with your entrepreneurial setup is to take that and marry that with low technology methodology. And produce something. So tell us about this.
Workshop basically. And that has been the core focus, because we started this in India and we wanted to use Indian sort of say methods of working overall. And for example, if we are able to use, I mean, what we started over there was, if you're able to use parametric architecture in a way where you can control the kind of material that's going, you can absolutely make any shape with that. But can you build it in India with, and so where on to looking at various crafts with that, and then to build around with how can we use this knowledge into a building technique in a way. So I think that's exactly where we sort of looked at a very high-tech sort of research around, say, the materials, and if we can reduce the amount of energy to build with the existing techniques that we have around in India.
So you were saying that you were working with, or you were trying to create the brick as a building block. What happened to that?
Yes. It's quite a funny story, actually. We went into that, and then we did an initial discussion around it. And when we spoke to people about that how much does this material cost? When I asked this to Anirudh, and he showed me a box as big as this much, probably this size, 4 inches, and he told me that might cost somewhere about $50 for us to capture, because they hadn't scaled.
$50 for a brick.
Yeah. So that's the amount of material that would go into it. And he told that so how are we going to justify that amount? So who's going to buy this? And from then we decided that probably that's not the answer to it, because we'll not be able to scale this. It's good as a research. We'll be able to build it. But what do you do after that? You'll not be able to sort of see it deployed anywhere because it's just too expensive.
So
Not only here,
in
but even outside.
comparison, how much is a regular clay brick in India?
It's if you see the red bricks, it's about 4 rupees in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
This is
it's
just to give our audience an idea of, you know, the kind of challenges. These are really realistic challenges that someone will stumble upon when you're looking at such sophisticated processes and material. And it might be a great idea, but you're talking about $50 versus a $4 brick or 4 rupee brick, sorry.
4 rupees, yeah.
Yeah.
4 pence, that's just 4 pence. And essentially that goes into a wall. So no one is going to pay for that because it doesn't have any sort of a design value. Why would I really pay for that? It's anyways not seen. It's plastered and painted at the end of it. So we moved from that, and then we thought that why don't we make a facade? Because everyone told us with the way that, I mean, we were doing, this is in 2008 now, and we realized that there was a lot of work that we were doing ourselves around elevation design. And people came to us, the entire building is done, the floor plan is done, interiors is done, everything is done. We need the building to look good. Can you just do the elevation for us? Because you've done these courses, so you might be able to do the elevation better. And we then realized that people want to pay for facade, which is the external face of a building, which you see. And that just meant that jo dikhta hai, wo bikta hai, basically. And we started from that, and we felt that, yeah, maybe there is a demand for facade, and we should maybe, so here is where we thought that we won't get the material from them because it's too expensive for capture, collect, and process in a way. How do we sort of have our own material in a way? So we worked with a technology. We had filters, 3 filters, and then try to capture the pollutants and the dust around it. And we thought that we'll make it with that. And that would be like a eureka moment for us, that if you're able to sort of crack this. We did that, and at the end of the workshop, we chose a base material, which was FRP. So FRP is fiber reinforced polymer. It's essentially, to bind it, you take one layer of, imagine a glass fiber, and then you apply resin on it, and then you apply one more layer of glass fiber to it. And the amount of VOCs that itself emits, so VOC is volatile organic compound. Essentially, volatile organic compound is something that you smell, like even if you smell the dish washing that you do, there's a certain smell that comes, the odor that comes, right? So that's a VOC that's given out, and that's harmful for us. And the kind of VOCs the FRP material with the resin gave, we could not sort of work with it even for more than 2 hours. We started getting headaches with that. And we realized that, no, we can't use this because this is giving out more air pollution than what we are trying to sort of work with overall. And we dropped that. And eventually we then started to think, what is it which will give a design value from the first one that we did, which is brick. Then from the second one, facade, what is it that will scale? How many people will really want a facade? Probably not many. So what is it that will scale? So it needs to have a commercial scalability. It needs to be commercial. It needs to be scalable. So these are probably 3 points that we learned, and then we moved into, say, a tile. Why not we use a basic element up after brick, maybe a tile? So,
and your tile was that eureka moment, right? Where it kind of, everything just sit together, everything fit well. And that's when you also started to kind of look into the process of making a tile. And I want to dwell on that a little bit. I mean, I think all of us would really love to know how you actually make that tile, from the entire process, the cycle of harvesting your material to actually creating the tile. I know it's split into 2 kind of segments. So if you can just walk us through how you actually make a carbon tile.
Yeah, so I can share a few my screen if that
Yeah,
is.
please.
So essentially, when we looked at, is my screen visible?
Yes, we can see it.
So essentially, when we started to look at tile, I mean, I'm just trying to yet say that we don't know if this is the Eureka movement yet, because every time we go ahead with things, we feel that this is about it, and we found it, and we are there. I'm just hoping that this is about it, and we'll be able to sort of commercially scale this, because it is as a business very difficult to work with the business and the research overall and merge it together. So there are two parts to this. One is how and where do we capture, say, collect the carbon emissions overall, and the second part is how do we manufacture this in a way. So the first part, we collect the carbon emissions from various factories, pyrolysis based factories that are there, and we work with them, and they have this carbon that's is my screen
Your screen share
there
has
yet?
stopped. Oh, yeah. Now we can see it. Yeah.
So essentially we take this from various factories. So imagine that you have a tire, right? And if a tire is sort of shredded and it needs to go, and if you need to break this tire into parts, you'll have the strings that are there, and the tire is made out of carbon in a way, and it is then sort of separated into a carbon and the waste sort of strings around that. So when we take this carbon is then goes into a landfill as a waste, or it goes into a cement factory, which is, they use this carbon because it has a high calorific value, which is what is used for burning, and which is where it ends up into the air, which is what me and you breathe at the moment. And either it goes into the landfill and then it pollutes the soil and the water bodies, and the fish, it's eaten by the fish and everything, and then that's exactly what we eat as marine life, basically. So we take this carbon and we work with this carbon with a 200-year-old craft. So we work with this. And 200-year-old craft. This is in Gujarat as a community. So these craftsmen, essentially, there are two crafts involved in this. One is the stencil that is made, and the other is the ones who are really making the tile. So the stencil is, first you take the parts, you shape them, you cut them, you shape them, you put them together, and then you pour it, basically. So that's essentially the process of making the entire tile. But once you made the stencil, you then work with the craftsmen who then look at a hydraulic press. So that's a hydraulic press. And then you press and sort of make one sort of tile with that.
So this entire process is still it's handcrafted, right? Each tile is handcrafted. So it's not a mechanized process.
No, it's not. It's each and every tile is handcrafted at the moment. And I think that is where the costs are higher for us. There are two types of costs that we are dealing with. One is the upcycling carbon part, and the other part is the handcrafted artisanal cost. Because what they do is, if they are not doing this, they would rather go into building, say, conventional say buildings with plasters and bricklaying. That's what they do if they don't do this, because they get more money over there. And leaving the generational knowledge that they've learned, they would rather do that for money.
So I have a couple of questions here in terms of the people who are working and the artisans who are working with you. They have options, like you said, they can go and do other things. But at some point, you chose to rely on an age-old traditional process of making tiles, which can very easily be mechanized today. I mean, we've got all the machinery in the world and everything can be done, with the press of a button. So why was it important for you to still rely on and still kind of use this handcrafted process?
Yeah, can I stop sharing?
Yeah, sure.
So, uh, I think it's a very sort of a difficult question for us as well, because we are yet trying to balance that act, I would say, because it's not completely easy to sell. I mean, I think of the other speakers earlier also mentioned about a similar problem that they are also trying to face.
Yes.
It's extremely difficult to sell something that's handcrafted, and especially in a country which is not completely valued.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the reason you see that 90% of the handicrafts are exported and they're not used in India. And to balance that, I think is extremely important while we move ahead, maybe using technology in a certain way to scale up. But for us, when we started, we wanted to sort of narrate stories around the craft that is there and how we can sort of make absolutely any pattern with that. But then when we were looking to make a tile, we never thought that we wanted to use a craft, frankly. And as a researcher, when we started to sort of work with it, I'm being extremely honest about this, we
No, I
sort of,
appreciate that, because we did talk about how the carbon, like you named it carbon craft, but till now your story's been about the carbon. And
yeah,
now you're kind of changing the narrative and talk more about the craft, because
yeah,
you
yeah,
also
yeah.
realize that it's important for you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think when we started our work around making a tile, we wanted to figure out how much energy does a tile take to manufacture this tile, like how much it emits, how much carbon is emitted to
Hmm.
make this tile. And while we were trying to figure that out, we were trying to find n number of see options of how we can make this tile. And then we realized that there is this very interesting technique which uses only 1/5 of the energy which is required to make any say conventional mass produced vitrified tile or a ceramic tile. And with that, we sort of looked at this craft, and then we saw that this is a whole new area of work. And we as researchers came into this and we loved it, because when we started to work with this craft, we realized that they know more than us. And it's absolutely true, because when we came up with the material, they were like, no, this might not work. I'm like, how do you say without even trying it? Because we as researchers, we would
Hmm.
want to experiment and try it and prove that it fails. And that's the methodical way of doing it. You can't see and tell that it fails. But they had some 30, 40 years of seeing it and working with it. And they could just say it by seeing it. And just looking at it, that no, this will not work. You need a different material, you need a different mix, you need a different sort of way of working with this will not work. And we were stumped, but we yet tried and we failed with that. And that's when the confidence built up that we can work with this craftsman and craft around it. And we can sort of see how craft can then become a larger sort of a work, because there is an entire pool of knowledge, skill, and technology around us. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. It's
Hmm.
already there. We just need to sort of work with them in a certain way and maybe try build solutions around that.
But did you, like, when you approach these artisans, you're not only telling them that, okay, do this a little differently, or change your process a little bit, or tweak it here or tweak it there. What you're literally saying is that you've been working with this material for all these years, for generations. Now we're introducing a whole different material, right? So you're literally taking their fundamental building blocks and changing those. So wasn't that a little bit of a challenge? Or like,
I
did you feel any resistance from them?
Yeah, to an extent, because you know, if someone gives you, it's a feeling, right? Like you are giving a material which is not indigenous to them in a way, or they don't work with. So they would be like, is this safe to use? You know, this is pollution. ये कैसा रहेगा? मतलब is it, मतलब हमको कुछ होगा तो नहीं use करेंगे
Right.
तो. That's why in
Yeah.
our, also when we see, when you see our work around that, they use masks. We felt it was utopian even a year ago when we were trying to do work with that. They're wearing gloves, they're wearing masks, and they are sort of working with that. And it's difficult because even today, when we wear the mask for like 3 hours, we are done. We feel suffocated with that already. And imagine them working with that. It's difficult. So those are challenges what we felt. But in a way, what I would like to say is what we did was we didn't change the process at all. Like if you see, the entire fundamental value remained the same in a way. They were working with this entire technique. They are working with this entire technique. We are experts around, say, the material science around it, and we are getting that onto the table. So we did all the tests. We did all the wet transfer strength. We did the material tests. We did water absorption strength. We did a lot of tests. And then we started to say, yes, this is the material that we can work with. This is the sort of mix we can work with. That is how we can play around with this material. So it remained entirely the same. For them, it was just, the only difference was the gear that they're wearing, and everything else was almost the same, because we then decided what will work and what might not work.
So, but Tejas, what you also did was that you introduced a new product into a market which already has a lot of options, right? I mean, today as an architect, I can say that there are millions of different flooring or surface treatment options. You've got so many different kinds of tiles, different brands. So you've entered a market which is already highly competitive. So how do you see yourself in comparison to your competition, and how do your tiles fare with relation to what is already existing in the field? Because I know some of the resources that you're using are also common to other people, like, for example, your stenciling guy, which I definitely would like for you to share with us about.
Yeah, so when we started to look for people who can sort of work with this, so we are in Bombay, and then we thought that let's try to make the stencil ourselves, and let's try that if we can replicate it in a way. And when we tried it, we miserably failed with the stencil. It failed like crazy, because it won't land on the place. The colors would go completely crazy. The entire material is going all over the place. So we realized that we can't work with this material. I mean, this stencil making, we can't do that ourselves. We need expert advice around that. And this is sort of one person who does the stencil making probably for any sort of technique right now, and he's the only guy who does it right now, and we're just hoping that he is able to sort of share that knowledge to someone else and keep this alive in a way, and we are scared about that as well.
So there's one guy who's a stencil maker and makes stencils for all the tile companies across the country.
Yeah, to an extent, he's the one who does for most of the companies around right now.
So do you feel some sort of like moral, do you feel some sort of moral obligation to perhaps extend his skill set onto other people, or have him kind of, teach people around him?
I think there are two things here. One is we feel that in a way that we have a huge responsibility to, if we are working with this, we need to also look at how we can sort of skill other people with this, because it's extremely important if you need this craft to sort of keep moving. But on the second part of it, we're extremely scared, because if we are not able to, then how will the business survive? How are we going to be able to work with it? So it's a two-sided sort of a situation that we are put in right now. But yeah, I mean, I think that it's the same for also the community, the craftsman community that we are working with right now. It's important that they also sort of extend the knowledge and the skill that they have, and work at training programs, and how we can sort of see their next generation who would want to, say, pick this up, because they are the most likely to sort of work with this, because that's an entire village who would want to sort of build around that. And then we can see how we can sort of scale this from there, which has another issue to it completely. But yeah, starting with that, maybe we would sort of look into that as a moral responsibility in a way, as well as a sort of a fear that if you don't do it properly, the business won't survive.
Well, maybe the fear is going to kind of feed into the moral responsibility. And I think what's also important to acknowledge at this point is that you guys are fairly young, right, in your endeavors, and you have you're not one of those companies who've been around for the last 20 years, and therefore you can do multiple things and you can kind of spread yourselves thin. But I have to commend you on the work that you're doing so far. I think that it's great that you're taking that initiative and that you're actually doing it. I want to come back to my earlier question about how what you feel about the competition, what you feel that you're introducing a brand new product into the market. What's interesting is that it's a responsible product, right? And it's driven by the process of its creation and the ethical value that it holds. But it's also compared to a lot of products that are currently existing, that are prevalent, that are highly, highly competitive in their performance, in their availability, in their cost. So how do you fare against that?
I wouldn't say that we've sort of figured that out yet. It's a constant journey. I would say that we are yet on to every day is a battle for us where we are learning new things. As you rightly mentioned, we are very, very young in our practice right now. And we are trying to balance life versus work in a way, which I think everyone sort of does that all their life, trying to balance both of it. And in a way, I would say that our the business end of it, which is we also do commercial practice, and we do residential, commercial, hospitality buildings, and which is designing around architecture and interiors, basically. So that's exactly what sort of feeds into our research at the moment. The finances, basically, which is what feeds into the research at the moment, which is what keeps it afloat in a way as a business model right now. But yes, it is difficult to get a completely new product which people are not aware about. Absolutely, there is no precedence around carbon emissions and making a tile with this and how it will fare. So there are no numbers around this. Will you really make money? Will you really be able to remove your investment around this? We didn't have any sort of a precedence around this. But then we also looked at then the other side of it. What is the opportunity around this? Is there a way that we can sort of spearhead with this and become pioneers around this and work with carbon emissions, which is maybe solving a larger problem around this? And we feel that this is going to be the future. We are very confident about the idea that every product that you're looking at is going to be carbon noted. Like you have to give a carbon rating maybe to every material that's going to come around. And imagine everything that you buy right now has that. And there are companies who are trying to work around this idea. And you buy based on the carbon emissions associated to it and not only the aesthetics around it. Because when I say this, because most of the architects, we drive around aesthetics. That's one major thing. I mean, I might take a stab at ourselves and our profession in a way, but it is in a way true, because very few people amongst us as a fraternity really know the carbon emissions associated to any sort of material. And it's only about learning and educating ourselves with that, and then being able to sort of work with that. And we feel that is going to be the future. Probably to answer that question, we are trying to bet on a larger, longer run, and not looking at the shorter sort of stint here. Maybe we'll have to say pivot from a few things, but we'll survive.
So you've always, I mean, from the beginning, you've had a lot of collaborations and you've worked with other people. So do you think the future perhaps lies in collaborating with other organizations and other people who are doing similar initiatives, perhaps?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the future is going to be collaborations completely. We, at the moment, to be honest, we are speaking with a lot of say companies. Like we're trying to work with retail brands, if we can do their entire stores with just flooring, and then how that can extend into walls, if it can extend into other products with them. For example, we are working with, we're trying to figure out some things with JSW, Godrej. We were trying to figure out if there's a way where mm, maybe we can make products which is for large scale construction. So they have the entire infrastructural need for it, where L&T say builds maybe 1 million square feet a year. And if we are able to sort of tap into a certain market like that, or if we can work with JSW and see that if they while they are building a township, if we can say figure out other solutions with that, which could be exterior cladding, which could be other products, but based on a certain similar IP that we have developed, and work with them. So say collaborations are going to be a huge part of the future. But if anyone wants to sort of work with us with any material base, or try to develop any products with us, and maybe if they have some sort of um, a project that they would love to explore and has a little bit of freedom, because experimenting in R&D is expensive. It's not as cheap as it looks. As we are saying right now, we've invested quite a lot of money into R&D, but yeah, we would be more than happy. Please do reach out to us, and we'll be more than happy to talk about it.
So we actually have Rajiv Jain, who is with us on Zoom, and he's asked a couple of questions. I'm going to pick one up saying, a lot of industries today have carbon precipitators to take out carbon particles from industrial gaseous discharge. Is there a possibility to create a value chain from this and focus on your core competencies? He also asks, what are your core competencies, considering that you're kind of involved in the entire process from beginning to end, right? From your raw material to product and your marketing. So what do you think your core competencies are, and how do you think you can use them with what is available?
Um, I think that's a very interesting question.
I'm also going to take the liberty of sharing some images of your product while you speak.
Sure, please.
Yeah.
I think the two parts of that question, the first part, can we use, there is an existing capturing technique, I would say, in a way. And if we can say work with them in some way to develop products, yes, it's possible, but it needs a lot of R&D, because every emission is going to be different. And we are actually discussing that with L&T at the moment, where they mentioned that they have a certain emission, and if we can work with their emission to develop products for them. But that's very difficult if you don't invest in R&D, because you have to know that where it is burned, what fuel is used for it to burn, what is the temperature at which it is burned, and what is the sort of chemical composition and the physical composition of it. And having to do all of that micro level research is extremely time consuming and expensive. If we are able to sort of, it's not, for example, to be able to say it easily for everyone to relate, it's not like AquaGuard, where you put an AquaGuard and then the water just sort of filters out and you just drink it from that. It's not a one-stop shop solution. Every carbon emission is going to be different, and being able to work with that is extremely difficult, especially when it's not sort of completely sort of worked with as yet. So yes, the first part is, yet it's possible, but it's expensive, and we can do it if we have the money for it. Second part, I think our expertise around, so my background is architectural design, and that's, I think, is the core sort of area of our work. And we're trying to merge, say, material science in a certain way and work with the building industry and build scalable solutions with that, which has an impact on that. So we are doing so much construction, right? Imagine if we can change only 1% of that material with the products made with carbon emissions. So that's a huge change that we'll be able to make within the construction industry itself. but that will cost us quite a lot for the research that we are doing. So my core focus is architectural design, and we're trying to now work with a sort of a visual communication, because uh, we as humans, basically, we believe in something if we see it, basically. And if you don't see it, it's not a problem. uh, Air pollution is not something that we see, so it's not a problem for us. So how do you know what is the carbon emission? How do you know that, okay, this this bottle is there, but how much emission has happened while you are using this product? So we are trying to build an intersection around that, and say architectural design, say material science, and trying to have a visual communication where people will be able to relate it to that, and there's a conscious buying overall. I just thought I'll also share, that's what the tile looks like. That's a sample
Uh, which one are you seeing right? Okay, sorry.
on
Yeah,
my screen. Yeah, on my
yeah.
screen. So that's what it looks like.
So you
And
have, what are the sizes that are available?
we work with 8" by 8" for the pattern tiles. That's 200 by 200 It goes on to 250 by 250 and 300 by 300. That's 10 by 10, 1 feet by 1 feet. It moves on to 2 feet by 4 feet. We can make up to 2 feet by 4 feet with this.
And they
Uh,
can be customized as per design.
Yeah, so that's also one of the best parts to this. You can make it sort of more personal to you, to your space, and how that sort of you connect to that. And that's one of the reasons why we also sort of worked with this sort of a technique where it becomes a personal journey overall. So you can make absolutely any design with that.
So also tell us a little bit. I think this is what's interesting, because a lot of the images that I've shared right now, they're all grayscale. And this was an interesting conversation that we had about why um, you're not making tiles that are of different colors, but they're all monochromatic in the different shades of grays. So why is that?
So um, this is a conscious decision by us. When we started working with it, we realized this is a huge challenge to standardize black and gray. As an exercise, if you just try to print something which is grayscale at your place, and you go to any printer outside and then you try to print the same image, you will have two different grays. It is so difficult to standardize black and gray. And we are in the process of trying to standardize that, because if a client will ask, we need to be able to give that gray to them. And with the changing parameters around everything that is there, we need to be able to have some constants. And probably we are learning that right now. And as well, if you relate with air pollution is only black and gray, and that relates well with respect to communication, that it comes in either black or gray. And why we don't go into colors, probably, I think, as yet, if you say that I need a certain pink, how do I get that certain pink? To be able to get that certain pink, I need to be able to put this certain pigment over here. Or how are we able to really be able to get that color constantly all the time? Because our sources are going to change, how they sort of born is going to change, and how we standardize it. It's a very extremely sort of a difficult process. So I think we want to learn first how we can standardize this with the gray colors, and that's what is sort of also relatable to people, and then maybe eventually move into colors while we are more confident of our supply chain, the colors that we are able to do, and then maybe look into other challenges that we can take on.
But they just tell me, I mean, for all of us, you know, and especially people who are running enterprises today, the biggest challenge has been in the last 6 months, where things have literally shut down, lines of communication have been disrupted. And, you know, we all know what it's been like with this whole pandemic. Tell us your personal experience. How have you, and how have the artisans that you're working with, how have they responded to this?
Uh, I I think it's a very difficult journey for all of us. Needless to say about that, it's one of the worst things that any of us are going to see in our lifetime, probably, hopefully. And this
Hopefully
happens
this is
once.
the worst.
Yeah, yeah. And it doesn't repeat. So that's, I think, one thing that we can't change. And all of us are affected with this. But I would say that in a way, our architectural practice and the clients that we've been working probably uh, since the past 6-8 years, that we've been able to have certain sort of credibility overall with this. And that helps us to build uh, a certain sort of a financial sort of a line that we can work with. And that has helped us with our research to keep afloat overall. um, we are trying to reach out. So we just launched in January, and we hit the pandemic in March. So after 3 years of our research, this is where we are, and we are taking it head on right now, because we don't want to leave this after having come so far with
Right.
this. And yeah, I mean, I think these are challenges, and we'll be able to face it if you believe that what you're doing is going to create an impact and develop a change, but you're also rooting for something in the future. It will work. So you just need to believe in a few things that you're doing, probably.
And have you gotten any support from the state, from any sort of administrative authorities, or have you sought any support from them?
Uh, we have been talking to people about this, but I think it's about the timing, and probably this is not the best timing at the moment. While this, the COVID and the pandemic that's going on, it's probably not the best time. Once we launch and then we hit this, everyone's trying to learn how to sort of respond to the current changing scenarios that we are in. So no, not yet. We had reached out, but no, we didn't get any support from them. But frankly speaking, we don't really depend on them so much. What we are trying to do is we uh, we want to look at more corporates, and we need them to sort of take responsibility.
Hmm.
We need them to sort of work with this sort of material, and we are trying to reach out to them, because they are the ones who are anyways building. And if they can build consciously, sort of nothing like it. We can work with a larger sort of a segment where we all can do good, and it's a win-win for all.
So considering you yourself are so young, are you open to taking other, collaborating with students and other architects and designers to, further your thought? I know we've got a couple of people over here who are showing interest.
We would love that, actually. We are trying to now set up a system where there's a larger platform where we can work with various people around this, because we feel that we have done quite a lot of work around understanding this material and working with it, and we can share that with people, so that there is a ripple effect in the impact overall. But we need to channelize that through a certain means of working, and how people can come on board and create the impact overall. And I think once we're able to do that, probably in the next couple 4 to 6 months overall, hopefully we'll be there. So there will be a lot more say collaborators that we'll be able to work with, and then I think in that way we'll be also able to communicate what is the impact of what they are building. Actually, there's, if I can deviate from the topic a little bit, we also want
Sure.
to sort of work with a certain system where you say that if you are building, imagine this building right where I am. Imagine if we are able to sort of give a carbon sort of a rating to each of the material that's been used in here. It could be the plaster, it could be the paint, it could be the flooring, it could be every material is accounted for. And then we are able to give a carbon rating to the building in a way. It's somewhere you can relate it to people say it's lead and griha, but imagine
Mm-hmm.
not that rating, but a carbon rating in a way. So what happens with that is a lot of the architectural work that we are doing is defined by the carbon emissions associated to it. And we sort of miss out on that in a way. Yes, there are frameworks around how Griha and Lead are working right now, but I feel it's again a little bit isolated in a way. And if we are able to just look at this as a major primary factor, then a lot of this impact could also be incorporated within that. And we're trying to work with them to try to define how do we do that, because you can't, I mean, even while we are working with carbon emission, there is no mandate how you could use that, and whether can you use the material in a way, and these mandates are not incorporated within these ratings as well. So it's a challenge, but I'm imagining architects trying to compete around less carbon emissions in a way while they are building, and that's the future probably I see.
That's interesting, and you know, it's also interesting to see how these ratings have become very popular. Whereas, of course, LEED and Griha are very well established set of ratings, but you've got a lot of others that are talking about building well-being, that are talking about product-oriented ratings, and they do, I guess, they have that sense, they have a credibility in terms of actually drawing up a comparison and putting up choices in front of people and allowing them to pick the responsible one. So that would be an interesting way to take this forward. Perhaps you could have some students who can do some research for you on that.
Yeah.
We have a question from Matrika Bhandari, who says, "Hi, thank you for the amazing talk. I'm a student and my research focus has been on sustainability, material innovation, and craft techniques. I have just started the research and my background is in product design and textiles. Could you give any advice on how to proceed with material innovation and development?" There might be a lot of people over here looking, seeking advice on how to do research and how to kind of go about that process.
Um, I would say that the one thing in our work that we constantly sort of discuss is the problem. What is the problem that you're really trying to solve? And if you're clear about that, then you will be able to work with any sort of research that you want to do. It can be material science, it can be technique, it can be design, it can be a visual communication. You need to be able to figure out what the problem is. So as Albert Einstein says, if uh, if there's a problem and if you know to ask the right question, I would spend probably 95% of my time to frame the right question. And if you're able to frame the right question, then you just need probably 5% of your time to invest into the answer. But you need to frame the right question. And I would say that start with that. Start to frame the right problem, because that's the most difficult bit. That's the most difficult bit. And we've been battling with that back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, even today. Even after being there since 3 years, even today we feel that we haven't figured it out. Even today we feel that we're not solving the problem. There are so many things, like for example, if I can give an example around this, we are talking about carbon emissions, but there is carbon emission associated to the entire system, right? For example, if it's made in point A and it's shipped to point B, there is a transportation carbon emission that happens from point A to point B. What about that? And there are a few people who ask us this question as well. And it's important to be critical about this and ask this question. But it's a business model now. You need to, it's a demand and supply issue. If you have more demand, you can increase your supply as well. But if you don't have demand, you can't increase your supply. Now, I would make it locally over there once there is demand over there. Until then, you have to sort of go into a distribution model. And these are challenges that we are also facing every day. I mean, every day it's a different challenge with what you do. But I would say that try to figure out what the problem is, ask the right questions. And if you are able to ask the right question, you'll be able to get to the entire solution. You'll figure it out from there, I guess.
I think what you hit upon was very key, is that it's not only about the final product, or it's not only about the initial problem, but it's also about the process, right? And here, like you've discussed, that it wasn't only about the carbon, but it's also about the craft. And that's what makes it carbon craft. It's important to identify what process you want to adopt and why you want to adopt that. That it might be easier to mechanize a tile making process, but is that the responsible way of doing it for yourself, right? And it's important to establish your own values and identify for yourself what it is that you want to do and how you want to approach certain things. So you can make machinery, you can invest the capital, but then after that, you know it's going to be an efficient process. Or do you want to invest your time and energy into a traditional craft and actually work with that, which might pose, bigger challenges, but there's also much learning from there.
Yeah, yeah. I think I would agree to that. And instead of asking probably the question in a way that one wants to work with the material and the craft and sustainability in a way, the question would be, how do I solve this problem? And that problem might not require the craft, it might not require the entire material research, but you can solve that problem in 10 different ways. And it's important to know what problem you want to solve. And I think it's just about it, and you'll be able to sort of get there with that.
So what's the next problem on your mind that you want to address?
I feel that we ourselves have a lot of challenges right now. For at least the next 1 year, what we want to do is build up our entire supply chain, get into a distribution model, learn more about business. I would say that's something that we don't know. We are researchers in a way, and we're trying to build a company right now. And how do you
I
stay
think that's
afloat?
very critical also, right? You need to be able to take that and monetize it so that you can feed into it and you can create that cycle for yourself.
Yeah. I feel that one thing that we want to change while we are looking at the entire thing is how craft is being, say, perceived in a way. So craft, in our mind, craft is looked at sort of a pity model. In a way, it's looked in a model that it's dying. It's they don't have money. It's pandemic, and we want to change that. We want to change that to a way where we say that they're at the forefront of this fight, and we want to work with that, and we want to create that sort of a image that we have this powerful sort of a skill set and a technology and the technique around this, how we can use this and build around it. And that's something that we want to sort of work with a lot more as the opportunity over there. But yeah, I think time will tell with that and how we'll be able to change that. But yes, that's something that we don't want to, and we don't dwell into. We don't work with craft as a pity. We work with them as the forefront of everything, and they are the drivers for us. How we can sort of help them in a way is something that we are sort of going to work with overall in the future.
So are you hopeful? Are you optimistic about the state of things?
I think as architects, you have to be hopeful, and that's the first thing that you have to do, or else one won't survive in architecture for a long way. And in research as well, one has to be critical, but one has to be also hopeful that there will be a solution someday, and we'll be able to get there. It's a balancing act, I would say. It's not probably easy for all of us to always juggle between the two. It's a constant a push and pull thing that we are doing with research and finances, and how we sort of balance this act. And now the kind of challenge that we're also facing is probably tile is, if you look at it, it's a larger sort of a product, right? Like you won't buy one tile. No one wants to buy one tile and do anything with it. So you have to buy a lot of tiles to be able to do your space, and people do that space only once. And we probably want to sort of start to look at smaller ticket size products where one can channelize this into a system in a way, and we can probably keep afloat as well. And we can keep the cash flow coming in so that we can sort of work with it. So that's our response to COVID in a way, but yet keeping true to our values, that we are working with carbon emissions to a larger segment, and how we can sort of deal with that. We are working with carbon emissions to solve the air pollution issue, and we are working with the craft to sort of work with them as a social impact thing as well. So yeah, it's a tough journey, I would say.
So along with being hopeful and optimistic as an architect and as a researcher, I think it's very important for you to be hopeful, for all of us to be hopeful and optimistic as entrepreneurs. And I think what you just described is a way of doing that, right? Is you don't kind of give up on one thing just because that's not working out, but you try to find ways to do other things to make this work. And I think that's a very key sort of takeaway from this conversation, because we have a lot of young people in our audience, and we get a lot of comments from people who are who want to kind of step into the entrepreneurial world and face the challenges and are uncertain about things. But what is very exciting from all these talks that we see is that it is a leap of faith, but you can't give up at that point. And I think you've been a perfect example and a motivator for that. But Tejas, thank you so much for joining us today. We can go on for the longest time, but we've actually we're almost at an hour and a half, and we didn't even realize how long it's been. But it's been absolutely fabulous having you with us today. It's been eye-opening on a lot of fronts. It's really encouraging to see that there's so much work that is going on. And there are young people like you who, and I can say that with a little bit of authority since I just discovered that you're younger than me, but there are a lot of young people who are doing a lot of great work, who are really putting themselves out there, who are experimenting and thinking out of the box, right? I mean, it's one thing to say that, oh, air pollution hai, saans nahi le sakte, but it's another thing to get out there and do something about it, right? At whatever scale it may be. And all I can say is that we hope that, right now you're making really expensive and beautiful tiles that are competing in a very, very competitive market. But let's hope that, in the coming months and in the very, very near future, it can scale up and your business model can turn into something that makes it more accessible for a lot more people. And therefore putting your product at the same sort of, at par with other commercially available products, so that the choice is not about, oh, do I have to sell an arm and a leg to be ethical and to address my moral responsibility? Or can I do that because I want to without, having to sell a kidney? So, and I think we're hoping that this could be a start of something absolutely fabulous for you and for all of us together.
Yeah, I think that's something that we are trying to work with, and we felt that ourselves when someone asked us, like, why is it so expensive? And as researchers, we start with the fact that it's the entire research that has gone into it. So someone has to sort of look into that, or else we'll go bust and we'll spend all our money just doing this. Yeah, I mean, our larger aim is to make sustainability affordable. Yes, we want to look at something that is you don't have to sell a kidney to be able to do that, and it's a larger journey. It's just probably about time to be able to do that. Like Tesla, they started with the Roadster, and now they are moving into the Model S, which they call is the affordable segment, which is yet not affordable in India, though. But yeah, so it's a larger journey. It might take 5 years, 10 years, I don't know, maybe 2 years as well. But we are on it, and hopefully we'll be able to reach there.
And you have all the support of everybody here behind you, and we wish you all the very best for your journey ahead. And I do hope that we can collaborate and we can do some stuff together. And if there's anybody who's got any ideas or has any sort of adventures that you want to go on together, please get in touch with us, get in touch with Tejas. Everyone's very open. I think the starting point is having a conversation, is questioning the ideas, and then, like I said, it's a leap of faith, and you've taken that leap of faith and you've started your journey. And I do wish that a lot more people join you in this, and we can all take this together further ahead.
Yeah,
but
thank you.
Thank you so much for sparing your Sunday evening, for joining us and having this very fabulous, very honest conversation today. And I'd like to thank everybody who's joined us on Zoom, on Instagram, on Facebook. If you have any questions, any comments, you want to take the conversation ahead, like I said, please reach out to us. And do join us again next Sunday. We've got yet another very interesting conversation coming up on Sundays with 200 million artisans. This is in collaboration with Unplugged Talks. And on behalf of everyone over here, on behalf of Virendra Vaklu, myself, 200 million artisans, and the entire team that works endlessly to put this together, thank you so much, Tejas, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Mrinalini.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Also,
everyone.
thank you to Siddhant for making it happen as always, without any glitches. Thanks a lot, guys. Have a wonderful evening.